that our telecom policies encourage investment to provide the infrastructure that's necessary for the grand conversation to expand, and that the policies help lower prices so that as many people as possible can participate. Certainly, regulations are needed, but in many states, including this one, it is necessary that those regulations change with changing times. Tremendous change has occurred in barely a quarter century. Mobile phones, Blackberries, iPhones, hundreds of television channels available to practically every home. The wonder of being able to quickly download entire newspapers, books, as I do frequently on my Kindle, music libraries, movies through broadband, and the ability through the internet to create new networks to stay in touch with the rest of the world, to communicate with video, text, and audio. Regulation, most of which resides in the states, has not kept up with these changing times. For example, different companies compete with each other to offer phone service, and I put phone in quotation marks. Wireless companies, cable companies, VoIP, voice over internet protocol companies, and the traditional telephone companies, and that's great. Competition should mean more investment and more reasonable consumer prices. Unfortunately, competition cannot thrive when different companies operate under different sets of rules while offering the same type of service. This is not just a matter of fairness. I am not sure that most consumers care, as a matter of equity, about whether a cable company has a different regulations from a traditional phone company. The point is, though, that if everyone is operating on a level playing field, the competition on that field will be much, much more vigorous. And consumers will benefit in two ways. First, from innovation, and second, from lower prices. And by the way, history shows that those two go hand in hand. So here's what I'm saying. To encourage the grand conversation, we need to improve regulatory conditions. We need to bring regulation into the 21st century. Some states already have. A good example is Indiana, where as a result of telecom reform legislation, thousands of new jobs have been created. Broadband has vastly expanded its reach. Major investments have been made to improve wireless networks and introduce internet-based television. And I encourage Ohio to look at what Indiana has done. States that move quickly to adapt their regulations to change would become the focus of new investment by telecommunications companies. And that means jobs and increased business activity. Despite the recession, both Verizon and AT&T have announced that they will put $17 billion to $18 billion each into capital expenditures this year. That's a tiny decline from 2008. There aren't too many sectors that are putting as much into capital expenditures this year as last, but this is one sector that is. And this capital will naturally flow to the states that have the best regulatory climates. Now, improving telecom regulation is only one way to encourage the grand conversation. Smart tax policies that boost investment and innovation are another. So is a more serious effort at improving secondary education. We cannot forget that these steps are more important today than ever. Yes, we need to drain the financial swamp that we are in, but we also need to build on dry land. The answer to our current fix is not just short-term stimulus, it is long-term, sustainable, growing business activity, both services and manufacturing, all driven by ideas. That is America's comparative advantage. If we forget it, we are doomed to failure. As you can probably tell, I'm an evangelist when it comes to the grand conversation. I fully believe it will change the world for the better. All such revolutionary change tends to work its way around barriers that governments innocently and with the best intentions throw up to prevent it. But by removing barriers, some states and nations can enjoy the benefits of the grand conversation more quickly than others. Those benefits, as I have said, are diplomatic. They are related profoundly to national security and to democracy. Those benefits are as well social and artistic. They help us develop the life of the mind. But the benefits are as well technological and economic. Our job as policymakers and as people engage with ideas, as you are here, is to help unleash the benefits of the grand conversation. And they are enormous, those benefits. I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to James K. Glassman, Director of the World Growth Institute and former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. We will return to our speaker in a minute for our traditional City Club questions. Please formulate your questions now, keep them brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those listening on WCPN-FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Radio broadcasts of the City Club are financially supported by Case Western Reserve University. Our television broadcast partners are WVIZ PBS IdeaStream and Time Warner Cable. Television broadcasts are supported by National City, a PNC company, and Cleveland State University. Closed captioning is supported by Nordson Corporation. Our live webcasts are supported by the University of Akron, and we thank all of our electronic supporters. Today we are pleased to welcome to our forum students who are here as part of our City Club student program. Participation of these students today is made possible by a generous contribution from the First Energy Foundation. With us today are students from Open Door Christian Academy. Will our student guests please stand and be recognized? Also today, we are pleased to welcome guests at tables hosted by AT&T. Now we return to our speaker for the question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Director of Development, Jessica Allen, and PR and Programs Manager, Carrie Miller. Thank you. First question, please.
Mr. Glassman, in lieu of all the increasing technology in the world and the possibility of Iran having an intercontinental ballistic missile, don't you think that the possible future Prime Minister Netanyahu might become the hero of the world by sabotaging any Iranian nuclear policy as the Americans did against Germany in World War II?
Well, I think that's certainly possible. Let me just say that we took the threat, the Iranian nuclear threat, very, very seriously during our administration, and there are indications that the new administration will as well. Although I think the notion that simply sitting down at the table with the Iranians is going to make everything all better is not. We'll see how that turns out. I think as far as the part of Iranian foreign policy or foreign policy toward Iran that I had something to do with, we have Americans and Iranians actually have a lot in common and really get along fairly well. Iranians like Americans. Iran has a great tradition, a great civilization, and we made tremendous efforts to make a distinction between the Iranian people and this terrible regime with which they are saddled. And for example, most people unfortunately don't know this, but we broadcast Voice of America in Farsi, the Persian language, every day, 7 hours of television.